Alright guys, welcome back. My name is Parky. For those that don't know me yet, welcome. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon. If you're watching on Twitch, follow, subscribe, do what you gotta do. All of it helps. I'm a new content creator and I really appreciate it all. Today we're going to be looking at Phyrexia All Will Be One, the new set coming out later this week. And we'll be looking at the black color today. This is going to be a review based on mana cost. So we're going to be going through all of the cards in black, and we're going to take a look to see what cards are going to be filling out your curve and what you think you should probably focus on depending on what strategy you're doing. This is all my own opinion without playing any of the cards, just by reading. I haven't seen anybody play the cards, just by basic value of the cards. But yeah, it's totally up for debate. This isn't like obviously, you know, I'm super highly pushing my opinion. I think it's just an interesting topic. It's a different spin than a lot of people do. I'll be showing the cards from left to right as we go through one or multiple slides for each mana count, and that'll be from worst to best. So let's move on to the first our 1 mana creatures here, and I guess other spells involved too. So our first one's going to be Duress, pretty standard, 1 mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-creature, non-land card from that, the player discards that card. It can brick, it's not always useful, it's probably not going to do a lot, and you're never going to want to play it. So that's basically it. Next is Vat of Rebirth, 1 mana artifact. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth. Pay 3, tap, remove 4 oil counters from Vat of Rebirth, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. This card isn't bad. It really does what you want it to do as a 1-drop. It sits there and it builds up oil counters, and then you can return creatures and note from the graveyard directly to the battlefield, which is really, really solid. You can pay 3 for potentially a big card. Maybe you discarded something. You know, it has its value. And then this could also be in a deck that has a ton of artifacts or creatures, small creatures that'll die. So it seems really, really solid. But I still think that Bilious Skull Dweller as a 1-drop, 1/1 Death Touch with Toxic 1 as a creature is a little bit better. And for those that don't know, I'll be going through each of the mechanics as they first come up. So Toxic is similar to well, I think it's been seen before, but anyways, when it deals damage to a player, it puts a poison counter dependent on the number after Toxic. So in this case, it puts 1 poison counter down on the opponent. Nobody's going to want to block this, especially if you get some sort of evasion on this somehow. It just adds on some early Toxic or some early poison counters that you can proliferate, and it does the job. And it's a good blocker later on. So I think it's a really, really good 1-drop, and it has a lot of uses in this set. Now on to our 2-drops, we have Blight Belly Rat. 2 mana, 2/2, creature with Toxic 1. When it dies, proliferate. So again, pretty decent card. Not a bad stat line for, or decent stat line, pretty standard for 2/2. But then the proliferate and the Toxic 1 really help add to it. But there are a lot better 2-drops in this set, I believe, because this is the one that I've ranked the worst. So, and on to Fleshless Gladiator, 2 mana, 2/2 creature, corrupted. So anything that's corrupted is whenever your opponent has 3 or more poison counters on them. So you can activate the corrupted by paying 3, and you can return this from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and you lose 1 life, which is pretty good. You're gonna constantly get a blocker up. Instead of taking more damage, you can put this guy back out and block and chump some things. So I think this has a little bit more use than the rat. It just seems very solid, and there's some sacrifice stuff in the set. Not much, but I think it's pretty good for a 2-drop. Then Scheming Aspirant, 2 mana, 1/3 creature. Whenever you proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Now the only problem that I have with this card is how much are you proliferating? So as a 2 mana 1/3 baseline, it's not bad. It's a good blocker. It holds the ground for a bit. But there are a lot of 3/2s in the set, and so you're not going to be able to block those well. And you're just going to die. So you can chump with it, but it doesn't really do much. And then the proliferate comes in later in the game, and it might not be there anymore. So I think it's kind of a trap in a way, because you're not going to have a ton of proliferate. Like obviously you can see the rat has it, but you know, maybe you don't have that down. And maybe the aspirant dies before that does. So I think it'll be hard to trigger that as often as you'd like. There's actually a better example of a card like this later on in this color. Next is Necrogen Communion. 2 mana enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control. It has Toxic 2, and then when it dies, you return that card to the battlefield under your control. So that's fantastic. Like anytime that creature dies, if somebody's trying to remove one of your better creatures, you can just bring it back when it dies. And it's got Toxic 2. Puts 2 poison counters down instead of 1. So I think it's a really good enchantment. I think a lot of decks will enjoy seeing that. You can put it on any evasive creature, and it's immediately a bigger threat. Next is Pestilent Siphoner. 2 mana 1/1 creature with flying and Toxic 1. This creature I feel like is going to be more effective because it puts early toxic damage through, but after a while it does lose its strength. Its value kind of dies out, and I could even argue that Necrogen Communion is better than this. But I do, I guess, value creatures a little bit more early on in the mana curve, because you're going to want to try to fill that curve out. And the best way to do it is with Vron, Executioner, Thane. I actually think there might be a couple. Oh no, that is the end of the 2-drop. So this is the one that I thought was the best. Vrain, Executioner, Thane. God, that is Vron? I don't know. 2 mana 2/2 legendary creature. Whenever one or more other creatures you control die, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This ability triggers only once each turn. This has really good synergies with white, with all their little mites. This has really good synergy in black because there's a lot of little creatures that you're trying to put damage through with. Note, it's not only on your turn, it's on both turns, so this can really ping down, and this was the ability that was better than the proliferate one. Obviously it's a rare, it's going to be harder to get, but still, I'm not worrying about rarity. I'm just going based on soul, face value, power, and its interaction with the rest of your deck. So alright, let's move on to 3 drops here. We've got our worst 3-drop, Geth, Thane of Contracts. I'm getting this Thane down now. Stop me from saying Thrane. 3 mana, 3/4. Legendary creature. Other creatures you control get -1/-1. And then it has a pay 3 and tap. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains if this creature would leave the battlefield. Exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate only as a sorcery. The reason why I put this so low is because it is a activate as a sorcery effect. If this was instant speed, way better. But the fact that you have to activate this on your own turn and you can't leave up a 3/4 blocker is, like, you're probably not bringing back a creature that has a better toughness than this. And it's going to have Summoning Sickness, so you're basically removing a blocker and putting out another creature that is a worse blocker than it originally was. And you're probably bringing back cheaper creatures, typically, unless you discard one of your better creatures. In that case, it's a good way to put out a creature like that, but I would say this in Limited doesn't have a lot of use. I would say this is more of a standard card that's going to have a lot of use. Yeah, that's basically it. Next is Caromonix, the Rat King, 3 mana 3/3. Legendary creature, Toxic 1. Other rats you control have Toxic 1. And when it ETBs, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of rat cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Or in a random order, sorry, not in any order. The only problem is there are barely any rats in this set. There's like 3 or 4 that I counted, maybe. So again, another standard card. It sucks that it's another rare. And you're gonna look next and there's another uncommon. So I am honestly pretty low on black. There are some good cards in black, but I think the fact that if you're gonna be trying to draft black and have a strong black deck and have maybe the chance of having your pick one in your pack as a black rare, you're gonna get some these more than the mythics, and you're not gonna be happy about it. So anyways, back to what we were doing here after that little rant. Chittering Skitterling, another tongue twister. They just want to mix us all up here. 3 mana 1/4 creature. This is a rat. Corrupted, so when there are 3 poison counters on your opponent, you can sacrifice an artifact or a creature, draw a card. So really not that great early game, but has a really strong effect late game, especially if you're stealing creatures and you want to sacrifice them. If you're just trying to draw a card and you've got some dead artifacts on the board, maybe creatures when they die, they have an ability. I don't know, but it has some use, and it's pretty solid. You don't have to pay anything to sacrifice them. You can just sacrifice them, and you can do it each turn, it looks like. Yeah, so pretty solid. Next is Infectious Inquiry. 3 mana sorcery. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, and each opponent gets a poison counter, which is a better take on this card from what it typically is. Just because, I mean, that's 1/10 of their life down. That's like technically I lose 2 life and they lose 2 life in a way. Obviously a little different, but you get what I mean. But you draw 2 cards, and this is pretty good filler for black. They don't have a lot of card draw typically, and that's pretty solid. Next is Stinging Hive Master. 3 mana 3/2 creature, Toxic 1. When it dies, create a 1/1 mite, and the mites are always going to be a artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and it can't block. So keep that in mind when I say the colorless or the 1/1 Phyrexian mite tokens. So solid card. It's a 3/3 or 3 mana for 3/2, and afterwards a 1/1, and it has Toxic. It's just the toughness again, so that really knocks it down a bit. If it was a 3 mana 3/3, pretty solid. But the fact that it brings out another body too, that has some use too. So all in all, pretty good, decent 3-drop as a common. So I would say it's a good filler C card. Next is Ambulatory Edifice. 3 mana 3/2 artifact creature. When it ETBs, you may pay 2 life. When you do, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, which is great. I mean, this you could potentially pay 2 life and it's removal. It's pseudo removal. It can also drop a creature down to the point where they can't block your toxic creatures. Any way to push through damage is going to be a good card. So I think, and you don't even need to pay for it. And I understand that the toughness is 2 again. It does knock it down a bit, but it has more use than the previous card. So pretty good all around. Next is Cutthroat Centurion. 3 mana 2/2 artifact creature. Sacrifice another artifact or creature, and it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You can activate this once each turn. So pretty good sacrifice effects, and this is common. What was the other one? The other one was uncommon. So decent sacrifice stuff going on in black. It's just whether you can find a way to actually sacrifice them. You don't have to pay anything for both of those cards. You can just sacrifice them. The nice thing too, you steal a creature that has an equipment on it. I believe you have that equipment stay on your creature, and I think you can I believe that actually stays under their control, so I think you can only sacrifice their creature. So scratch that, but still pretty solid, you know, can become a 4/4 occasionally when you need it. Decent blocker, can push through some damage, so not bad. Next is the classic Phyrexian Arena, 3 mana enchantment. Beginning of your upkeep, draw a card, lose a life. So it's going to be a good card. It's going to be, you know, a lot of people are going to draft it for the value. If you can get some life gain in your deck, that's even better. But yeah, speaking of life gain, we're going to move on to Bone Picker Scourge, 3 mana 2/2 flying creature with Corrupted, and when that's activated, it has Death Touch and Lifelink. So I would say probably like an easy pickup every time you want to play deck, or a deck black. 3 mana, it works with poison counters, it has flying already, you know, it just does really well. And then the fact that late game it has Death Touch and Lifelink, you block their best creature, you gain a little life. I think that's a great card to have in your deck. On to the 4-drops. You have our worst 4-drop, according to me, Ravenous Necrotitan, 4 mana 6/6 creature with Corrupt. When it ETBs, you can sacrifice a creature unless the opponent has 3 or more poison counters on it. Sorry, you sacrifice a creature unless the Corrupted is activated. So this has like a high ceiling, low floor again. So you can play a 4/4 or a 6/6 for 4 late game probably, but early game you're playing a 6/6 for 4 and sack a creature. But there's also the fact that there are a lot of cheap creatures you can sacrifice. So it really depends on what you have going. So it's a little bit specific to your scenario. It can be good, it can be not so good. But black was a little bit difficult to rearrange. So a lot of these cards, you know, you could probably move them up and down a little bit here and there, but I think I've roughly where they might land. Next is Feed the Infection, 4 mana sorcery. You draw 3 cards, lose 3 life, and if Corrupted is activated or enabled, they also lose 3 life, your opponent. So that could kill them, you know. I mean, it could kill you too, so it has its downside where you might not be able to play it. If this had Cycle, it'd be fantastic, because these cards are always difficult, because if you can't play it, it's another dead card and you hate drawing it. It's almost like one of those cards where if you're up, you're doing well. If it's a close game at the end, you know, you might get lucky. You're at 4 health, they're at 3, you play this down and you win. But, you know, it's hard to say if this is going to be good. It might just be a little bit too narrow for people to play it, and people might be a little bit nervous to have this as a 4-drop in their deck. Just like this next card, Phyrexian Obliterator, 4 mana, but all swamp, 5/5 creature with trample. Whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. So extremely good card for 4 mana, but really hard to play. So if you're mono black, by all means, draft this card. But if you're pick one, pack one with this card, you better be cutting black off as much as you can, because that's the only way you're going to be using this card. Next is Testament Bearer, 4 mana, 4/1 creature. When it dies, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, the rest into the graveyard. This is another staple card that just helps you either block well or, deal a lot of damage, and you also get to draw another card off of it. So I think the value just kind of bumps it up there. It's, for sure value. A lot of these cards are very reliant on what else is going on. This one just automatically, that you're going to draw a card. They might exile it, I guess, but most likely they're not going to want to use an exile effect on this, so it's going to be a good card for your 4-drop spot. Next is a Archfiend of the Dross, 4 mana, 6/6 creature with flying. Enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from Archfiend of the Dross. Then if it has no counters on it, you lose the game. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, its controller loses 2 life. So this card is really good for the cost, obviously, but it has its downside. If you can flicker this card is fantastic. If you can sacrifice it yourself, this card is fantastic. Otherwise, you better be able to attack with this card, and hopefully they're already pretty low, because this card might cost you the game to play. It's very risky. Maybe they counter or whatever, or kill your creature that can sacrifice this card. Maybe you have a plan set up. You have a creature on board that sacrifices this, but they see you playing this and they kill it immediately. And now you're just on the clock. And they might have something to, say, lock it down, like an enchantment. Something to just fix it to the board, and now you lose. So there's high risk, high reward with this card. So that's why it's a little bit lower. Next is Shieldred's Headcleaver, 4 mana, 2/4 creature with menace, Toxic 2. And I think the fact that this has menace makes this card so much better, because there is a decent amount of removal in black, so they're not going to have a lot of creatures left, and Toxic 2 will add up very quickly. But yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a good evasive creature, and with Toxic, it's even better. Next is Necrosquito, and it's a 4 mana 0/0 creature, similar to the last 0/0, where it enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Necrosquito, what is a Reader Skeeter? Necrosquito, holy, gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Necrosquito. So this one I like better than the blue one. The blue one's obviously cheaper, but this one, the fact that it's whenever something goes in the graveyard instead of casting a non-creature spell, I believe the other one is. This one is going to be a lot easier to grow, and it's going to be a big threat. Now the only problem is a 4 mana 1/1 or 2/2, sorry, is going to be not the greatest baseline. So you're going to hope that you're playing this down and you are losing creatures that turn, if not the next. So better in decks that go wide, like a black-white, but we'll see. On to 5+ drops. We have Cruel Grimnarch, a 6 mana creature with Death Touch. When it ETBs, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you gain 4 life. So pretty good. I mean, 6 mana for 5/5 Death Touch isn't bad. It's expensive. And the only reason why I have it as a worse 5+ drop in black is because the other cards just do a little bit more. And some of them a lot more. So, I mean, this card could be it's very reliable. You can remove something from their hand. Maybe it's their last card and it's their only removal for a big creature, and this gets rid of it. And that could lock down the game. But I don't know. It's a common card, so you're going to see it a decent amount. But it's up to, next couple weeks to figure out if that's a good card. Next is Drivnod Carnage Dominus, 5 mana, 8/3 legendary creature. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability or a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time, similar to the blue one. 2 Phyrexian mana, exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard, put an indestructible counter on Drivnod. So I think this card is going to be very good when you can put an indestructible counter on it. Remember, that's not until end of turn. So once you get that indestructible counter on it, it's going to be a very good card. But until then, it's not going to be that great because a lot of cards can block it. It can also take a burn spell in red. It can get bounced once it has the indestructible counter on it. There's a lot of things that can happen to it that can kind of drop this card down. I just think the toughness, there's really a, you know, it kind of defines how strong this card is. So in the right deck, this is going to be a good card. That Emergence, 5 mana sorcery, pretty classic. Put target creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield, but then it also has Proliferate on top. So this is just kind of an added effect that's nice. It helps you add some counters to things, and it brings a big body back onto the battlefield probably. And I think it's pretty solid. It's again reliable. It does what you want it to do every time, and apart from that, it's a little bit expensive as a sorcery. Next is Gulping Scrap Trap, 5 mana 4/4 creature. When it ETBs or dies, Proliferate. And I think the fact that it has both abilities makes this a little bit better than the other cards. It just does, proliferating twice is fantastic. Like, that's adding 2 poison counters, that's adding oil counters, that's maybe helping out your planeswalker. There's a lot of things that this can do, and it's flexible in a lot of different decks. So I think that it is kind of like all reliable for that 5-drop spot. Next card is Nimrazer Paladin, 5 mana 4/4 creature, toxic 2. When it ATBs, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So it's pretty good. I mean, it's a 4 mana with no evasion, toxic 2 for 5. So it's solid. I like the fact that it brings back a creature that may be important for whatever you're doing. It just has extra value to it. I think that's really handy. I might even swip Scrap Trap with it a bit, but who knows? Because that there may be some really good targets for that reanimation, or not reanimation, but I guess bounce back to your hand from the graveyard. So Vraska Betrayal's Sting, 6 mana with 1 being Phyrexian, as a 6 loyalty legendary planeswalker. Pays 0 and you draw a card, you lose a life. Proliferate, -2, target creature becomes a treasure artifact. With tap 1, sacrifices artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and you lose all other card types and abilities. And then -9, if target player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. So that just wins the game, I believe. Fewer than 9. Oh, it just brings them to 9 poison counters. So it doesn't win them the game, but it almost does. It sets you up to win. But then the next turn you can proliferate and you win. So, I mean, pretty broken. You just have to continue to proliferate and proliferate. It would take 4 turns to get there. It does take quite a while to get there. So I could see that being a little slow, but really, really good. On to Black's Interaction Removal. So Vraska's Fall is a worst removal spell, a 3 mana instant. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and gets a poison counter. And the fact that that's the worst removal spell, I'd say, is a pretty good sign for Black, because you put a poison counter automatically and they have to sacrifice something. Probably not going to be their planeswalker, but it could be a creature that's decently sized. Maybe they don't have any weak creatures on their board, so not too bad. Also, it's a instant spell, so it's a little bit better, but still gonna be Like just anything that the opponent has the decision makes it a little bit worse. Alright, Annihilating Glare, 1 mana sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this, pay for or sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker. So, not bad. Like, there's going to be a lot of creatures or artifacts to sacrifice that are pretty small to help you kill something. Paying 5 to do that also is pretty good, so it's just a basic common removal spell. Next is Offer Immortality, 2 mana instant, target creature gets Death Touch and indestructible, which is great. Pretty self-explanatory. Next is Drown in Ichor, 2 mana sorcery, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, and Proliferate. So you might be able to remove a creature. It also proliferates, which is fantastic. Like I said, I'm thinking I'm gonna be highly valuing proliferate cards. But yeah, it deals with a good chunk of creatures. I wouldn't say it gets rid of all of them, but it's a 2 mana card, so I wouldn't expect it to do a whole lot. I would even say maybe Offer Immortality does a little bit more, because you can give Death Touch, Indestructible, protect a creature, plus maybe destroy a creature, and then it's instant speed, but I would say those two are a little bit interchangeable. Drown in Ichor is hurt a little bit because of sorcery, but whatever. Next is Shieldred's Edict. I think it's Edict. 2 mana instant. Choose one. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, or sacrifices a creature token, or sacrifices a planeswalker. And I like the fact that even though they get to choose what it is, you get to choose what they are choosing. So it's, in a way, you have a little bit of choice. You can target planeswalkers. In limited, you're not going to have 2, I would hope. Otherwise, you're probably not going to win the game anyways. And then, yeah, like, you get a little bit of choice. The only unfortunate thing is if they have a bunch of non-token creatures, then you just get rid of 1. And it's going to be their worst one. So really high upside, again, low ceiling. So not one of the best removals, but it's a decent one. Next is Whisper of the Dross, 1 mana instant. Target creature gets -1/-1, and you proliferate. So really good potential removal, potential to help you attack, maybe push through some damage if you have trample. Proliferating is great. Just, you know, really solid 1 mana card that they're not going to expect. It's real sneaky. So I think anybody see a swamp up, you just got to expect this one's going to be in their hand. Next is Anoint with Affliction, 2 mana instant. Exile target card if it has mana value 3 or less, but if Corrupted is enabled, they can exile any creature. So really, really solid instant speed card. It's good early game, it's good late game. So I think this is going to do everything you want it, and you're going to want to take this when you see it. It's not as, you know, impactful as the red 3 mana instant deal 3 damage, but I think this is pretty close to it, and it's exile, which isn't often found in black. Next is the Big Mamba, Black Sun's Twilight. Pay 1 swamp and X, instant speed, up to 1 target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. If X is 5 or more, return a creature card from your with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. The fact that it's tapped isn't a big deal, to be honest, because you can play this on their turn, kill their creature, your creature comes onto the battlefield, and that untaps on your turn, and then you get to attack with it. I get that if you played it on your own turn, you're not going to have a blocker up, but still pretty good. I really like that card, and you can bring back some pretty big bombs with that, so I'm a big fan of that. And that's going to be it for black. If you enjoyed what you saw, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of these rankings and what's going to be your go-to black card in each mana value, because there's a lot of room for cards to move around, and there's a lot of interesting synergies throughout the set. And at the end of all of these color reviews, we're going to be going over the multicolored artifacts, and then we'll also touch on some really cool synergies between colors that you might see throughout the set as it's available. So really excited for that. Once again, if you're watching on YouTube, drop a like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, and if you're on Twitch, follow, subscribe, whatever you gotta do. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Next Monday we'll be running at the same time, 9:30 on the stream. So I'll talk to you later, and have a good night.